Really pleased, came through injury-free. I thought we gave a good performance, got better as it went on, probably a little bit lethargic the first 20 minutes. Apart from that, I thought we showed good intensity, really good attitude to the game. These games are always difficult because sometimes you have to create your own tempo and own intensity, but I thought we showed we were superior in all departments.
He speaks the truth.
Here come the cherries and we're heading for the top of the tree. Bournemouth is a team that's going to show Division 3. Here come the leaders and the scorers at the fourth Saturday, showing how to win the Southern way. So we sing, come on Bournemouth, come on Bournemouth. While you're out there winning, hear the shouting and the singing. We sing, come on Bournemouth, come on Bournemouth. Here come the cherries, here come the cherries, here come the cherries, number one.
Hello and welcome to All Departments. In the past couple of weeks, pre-season has been hotting up in every sense at Dean Court as the squad has sweated their way to convincing hammerings of Eastleigh and Dorchester, with only Ryan Fraser and Tequila Ranti suffering any ill effects from watching the opposition pick their ball out of their net with alarming regularity. Callum Wilson was amongst the scorers at Dorchester, and so upset was he that Mohamed Koulibaly had been a makeweight in his $3 million transfer from Coventry that he insisted that we replace him with his brother Ali Koulibaly without delay. The club have been looking for fans to join various focus groups, and no doubt once they have finished admiring our new line in zeitgeist-defining loom bands, the next item on the agenda will be Sky TV moving our fixtures to whenever they find convenient. Our True Blue third kit was released in patchwork fashion, leading to an exercise in piecing together last seen around the court when Sean O'Driscoll found himself in front of a microphone. The Solent Fans Forum is guaranteed to throw up plenty of polarised opinion, but one thing I'm sure everyone will agree on is the sadness we all felt on learning of the death this week of John Captain Kirk, a man whose presence on the bench throughout the 1980s always filled my heart with joy. Like all football clubs, our beloved Cherries could not hope to succeed without the hard work and dedication of its largely unheralded and occasionally even unpaid staff. One man who has spent over 40 years ensuring that we can fulfil our fixtures is club stalwart John Harriss, who spent several decades as head groundsman and is currently referee's liaison officer on match days. I met up with John recently and we had a wonderful chat about his many years in and around Dean Court. John, welcome to All Departments.
Thank you.
So you've had a long history with AFC Bournemouth. I believe it goes all the way back to 1939. You must have been quite young then.
10 years old. I'm giving my age away now.
And what was it like in those days? Can you remember?
Yes, I can remember. I used to meet my grandfather at the Kings Park gates, the park gates, when he used to come out of the British Legion, and we used to walk across and come in and the South Stand and watch the game. Unfortunately, or fortunately in one way, the first game I saw was on September the 2nd. The season unfortunately never continued owing to the hostilities at the time. But I still used to come to Dean Court because though it wasn't used for football at the time, I can remember coming and seeing the Home Guard display their weaponry. I can remember the Canadians playing baseball and certain activities like that. And of course, we'll look forward to when the season started again after the hostilities.
Do you remember any of the players from that era?
Yes, Matt Busby. He guested because just after the war you could guest players. Matt Busby, or Sir Matt Busby, was one of the obviously famous names that played for us. Lester Finch, who was an amateur international player for England, and several players like that. I believe at the time believe it or not, Aldershot were lucky enough to field a complete international side, owing to the fact that the players were stationed at Aldershot.
So the war came to an end after 6 years. You were a bit older then, and then you must have gone on quite soon after the end of the war to do your national service.
That's right, yes, 1948.
And was that where you first began to work with pitches?
Yes, that was my first introduction to it. I was, as most people know, you had fatigues, and one of the jobs was helping the groundsman at Bulford Camp, preparing pitches, and I got quite interested in it then.
And then did you come straight back to live in this area afterwards?
Yes, I've always lived in this area. I'm a Boscombe person. Always known the club more as Boscombe than AFC Bournemouth. I live quite close, Gladstone Road and Ashley Road. So. And I would tell you, I thought this morning when, which doesn't happen now, when I was quite young, we used to come over here because just after half time, they used to open the gates and you could come in for nothing. So that's what we used to do some of the time.
So you've been pretty much a regular at Dean Court throughout your life, and you've seen lots of ups and downs. We often hear about the cup run, the famous cup run we had in 1957 when we reached the quarter-final. Do you remember much about that?
That was a time when we lost to Manchester United and the Busby Babes. Yeah, I can remember. Yeah, I can remember most of it really. We went away to Wolves and we beat Wolves. Reggie Cutler took the goalpost down. It was delay, but anyhow we win. Then we played Tottenham at home, and we beat them. And being biased Bournemouth fan that I am, I'm convinced we should have beaten Manchester United. But it was a privilege to see the players. Unfortunately, a lot of them got killed coming back at Munich Airport. But they were. It was very good times. Biggest crowd I've ever been in at Dean Court was that game. I can remember the buzz came round that tickets were on sale, and I believe it was a reserve game against Aldershot, and we all dashed over and to queue up for our tickets. I think there was about 17,000 at a reserve game, which I think was quite a high attendance.
Higher than our current home crowd.
Mm.
And then it was about, was it 25,000 at the Man United game?
Yes, yeah.
And is it true that you took your wife to a game at Dean Court on the day you got engaged?
That's true. True.
Can you remember which one?
No, I can't remember, unfortunately. I can't. The biggest thing was my wife coming, really. I can remember the date. I can remember it was the 14th of February, Valentine's Day. So if you care to look up for the fixture of that particular day, you can find out what the game was. And if you do, please let me know.
I will. And was she a fan prior to that, or did you induct her into Cherry fandom at that stage?
She's not a fan. She's not a football fan. She's only been twice to see a game, solely to see a game. Obviously, she's been here on other occasions. The second time she came, it snowed, and she came with my daughter, and I had to brush the snow off the lines, and I said she couldn't come again to another game, so I don't think she was too worried about that.
You fanned her from coming. And before you began working at Dean Court, did you have other jobs? Were any of them related to what you did on the ground staff at Dean Court?
No, not really, no. Just prior to coming here, I went to Southampton with Len Stanbridge. I was a groundsman there, and I worked up a general knowledge for 3 or 4 weeks just to get me into the swing of things, and then I carried on from there.
And how did you come to be on the ground staff here? Did you know someone or see a job advertised? Or
well, a vacancy occurred, and I was lucky enough to get the job as such. Quite privileged, really. Very honoured.
And that was when we were in the 4th division.
1970.
We'd been relegated, but in your first season we were promoted under John Bond.
Yep. Yeah, that was it. John, yeah. We had a good team. Good players. Very good players.
And what was he like to work with, John Bond? Was he demanding in terms of the pitch?
No, he obviously he required a decent pitch to play on, but I found as long as you did your job, that was it. There was just one occasion when we'd lost to Bolton Wanderers on the Saturday, and on the Monday he came to me and he said, "John, the pitch wasn't up to scratch on Saturday," and I said, "Yes, boss. Why was that? What's the problem?" And he said, "Oh, the players said you couldn't play on it." So I said, "Oh, yes, fair enough." I said, "Could I ask you one question?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, could you tell me, how did you think Bolton played?" And he said, "Well, they played good football." I said, "Well, Gaffer, if one side can play football, so could we." And he said, "Point taken." And that was the end of the conversation. And I carried on.
And what was Dean Court like in those days? Because when I first started coming in the early 1980s, it was pretty run down. It wasn't rebuilt for quite a number of years after that. Was it looking brand spanking new in those days, or was it in need of a lick of paint?
I suppose you could say really it could have done with a lick of paint. But I think the point was we were quite successful. I think if you've got a successful team, people are not looking and nitpicking. They come to see the team. They come to see the game, and it's virtually like any game. If you're winning, top of the league, they'll just come and stand. Wind, rain, snow, they're not worried.
Now we're looking out today. It's a lovely July day. There's a couple of ground staff mowing a very pristine looking new pitch. But back when you started on the ground staff, it must have been a bit of a different job looking after this pitch. Things must have changed quite a bit over the years.
They have. Obviously, the new ideas, new technology of ground construction, all these things have come. Grass seed has improved. Everything really progress for the benefit. The big thing is, are we there now going to get on to artificial? I think in some ways for the teams in the lower league it could be beneficial financially, but to be quite honest, we all like to play on grass, don't we?
Was it more difficult to care for the pitch in those days?
Yes, yeah. Obviously, finances weren't as good, and obviously the pitch construction was entirely drainage. You relied on natural drainage, really. Equipment, minimum equipment. So, the unfortunate thing is when you're old and you're referring back to when you did it, people get the idea that, oh, the silly old bugger, he's praising himself up because he did that and this, that, and the other. But to be quite honest, groundsmen with professional clubs, in my opinion, do the best job possible with the finances and the backing they get. If you haven't got the finances, you can't buy the fertiliser. If you can't buy the fertiliser, you can't feed the grass. All these things people say to me, I've been asked so many times, oh, what's the matter with this pitch? And I honestly don't feel that it's fair to make a comment on somebody else's pitch unless you know the reasons why. I wouldn't like it. I can remember going back when we were in such dire straits that I couldn't get marking out liquid or powder it was then to mark out the pitch. But I had a good contact, and I'm not saying who, where, or what. But he said to me, he said, John, would you like some torn bags that we can't sell? And I said, oh, yeah, it'll get me out of trouble. And so, mysteriously, 3 or 4 bags got torn. And those are the things, those are the problems you had that, you overcome it because you enjoyed the job. You couldn't do the job unless you loved it.
What's it like when there's postponement or a potential postponement? You must have felt at times under a lot of pressure to get the games on in very difficult circumstances weather-wise.
Oh yeah, you do. Well, you can only do your best, and you just keep your fingers crossed, say a little prayer, and keep going. I will say, they did play conditions maybe that they wouldn't entertain today, but I didn't have many games called off.
As well as tending to the pitch, were you involved in the upkeep of the ground, or was that something that was more left to the apprentices?
The apprentices used to help me. Of course, they in those days they used to clean up the ground, clean the players' boots, do jobs like that. It got to the stage, I think it changed because people thought that several clubs, not this club, but several clubs just used to take on apprentices to do the menial jobs around the ground. And that's when things changed.
And what was it like around here in the post-John Bond era? Because he went to Norwich, quite a few of the players and staff followed him, and then we had a bit of a difficult time for a few years. You remember much about that?
Yes, I can remember when, and I think it was John Benson took the brunt of it. We had to get rid of our youth team, reserve team, and just play with a first team squad, which I think might have been about 15 players. And things were tight. Things were very tight. I relied on a lot of goodwill from people I knew that helped me out with machinery and stuff like that. But, oh well, that was part of it. I'm going back to saying it. I'm praising myself up, and I don't want to do it that way, but
not at all.
But those were the conditions we had, actually.
Well, you managed to get the game on most weeks, probably 99% of the time, so you certainly did a good job. And then around the time I started to come, we had a bit of a revival starting in the early 1980s. Dave Webb got us promoted. That was the first season I was coming, and then Harry Redknapp took over, and we had a very successful time under him in the 1980s. What was he like to work with?
Started with Dave. Dave was all right. He was a real character. I found him very, very good. Well, going back to all the managers, and I've been under quite a few managers. I've all found them very, very, very good. I think prior, if my memory serves me right, prior to Dave Webb was Alex Stock, and he was a gentleman. He was a real gentleman. He was. I used to go about with him. We went to the All Army Cup final, and he was a real gent. He even invited me to his daughter's wedding. And Dave, he was a different type of person. He was out to win. Very good, very good. Lovable fella. Can tell you some stories, but I won't. Yeah. Then came Harry, of course. Another character. Good fella. Still a very, very good friend. Very good friend. And I class him as a friend. Well, most of the managers I've found, I've got on really, really well with. I can tell you a little story about Don Makeson.
Do.
That we ended up quite funny, really. We were going through a period when we couldn't win a game at home. I think it was 3 or 4 matches we played, and we hadn't done very good. And I used to train on the pitch. And I said to him, I said, you know what the trouble is, Gaffer? I said, you're training on the pitch. You shouldn't train on the pitch. It's no good. As long as you train on the pitch, you won't win. And he said, oh, bunkum, get on. You just don't want us out there. So I thought, well, that's no good. So I said to the players, oh, you won't win. So the next thing I know is he came to me and he said to me, you bugger. He said, you've been getting at the players and they don't want to train on the pitch. And he went away, and then on the following Saturday, we won. And I said, there you are, Gaffer, that's because you're not training on the pitch. So, pure luck.
He should have put you in charge of first team affairs after that, I think.
I think so.
And then you mentioned how Harry Redknapp's still a good friend, but he didn't hesitate in the 1980s to stitch you up on national television when you were the victim of a sting by Noel Edmonds' hit squad. From what I've seen, they were staging little explosions on the pitch, weren't they?
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, I wasn't very happy, I can assure you. Because we were going to play pre-season. This was pre-season. Actually, they were going to do it the year before, but I wasn't around, so I think I was on a holiday or something. Very rarely get a holiday, but you did. You were obviously you were on your own as the groundsman, so holidays were a bit rare. Well, it was really Harry knew about it, but I just think it was Brian Tyler. It was really, I've got to give him the credit for stitching me up, I think, if you can call it stitched up. But there were the people that instigated it were some supporters. Two supporters had written in and set it up, but Brian Tyler really caught me out, and the chairman, because they said to me on I believe it was a Saturday, they said, "Oh, John, will you pick Brian up from his hotel, from a hotel? I think it was the East Cliff or East Anglia Hotel." And I said, yeah. So I went to pick him up, and he wasn't there. So I thought I got the name of the hotel wrong. I thought it must be the Eastcliff or whatever one. So I went there, and he's not registered there. So I came back to the ground, and I saw the chairman come out, and he said to me, "What are you doing here?" I said, I've been to both hotels, and he's not there. He's not registered there. So he said, "He's there. He's waiting for you. You better go back." So I went back, picked him up, and on the way there, Brian said to me, he said, "Oh, John, what it is," he said, "I bought a bungalow at Ashley Heath," he said, "and what I want you to do is to come out and look at the grass, because there's a lot of trees there, and give me your opinion." And I said, "Yeah, all right." So he looked at his watch and he said, "We're a bit late for the appointment." He said, "You better go to the ground to phone the woman up to make sure that we can still come." So I said, "Yeah." So we drove to the ground, came in where he went to get a thing. The chairman come up to me and he said, "What I'm thinking of doing," he said, "is hanging some advertising boards at the back of the stand." He said, "Come and tell me what you think." So we walked up in the stand, and he showed me where he was going to do it. And I said, "No, you can't do that." I said, "Because the people in the back row, they won't see the game." So he then casually looked across at the pitch and he said, "What's going on out there?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well," he said, "it's your pitch." He said, what don't you know then?" I said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Well, you better go and see." Well, of course, then it unfolded. It was Noel Edmonds, and the two people that I least expected to stitch me up was the chief executive and the chairman. And it evolved from there. But it was...
And you didn't get a chance to get them back?
No, but I nearly hit Noel Edmonds.
Yeah, you looked pretty furious when I saw it on the internet. Moving on to the 1990s, probably had quite a few of these over your long association with the club, but we were very close to liquidation in 1997. Were you fearful for your job at that stage?
No. I've never been really. I never thought of it in that way. Funny enough, you come. That's quite. No, I never thought it. I was quite happy, quite contented, and no, it never entered my mind really. I suppose I should have thought that, but I didn't at the time.
So you were confident that we'd stay in business?
Always confident about Bournemouth, or Boscombe as I call them. You've got to, because when I think of it, I always thought, and it was always said when I was a young lad here, Bournemouth didn't want promotion. They were quite happy to stay in the third division then. They were quite happy, that's as far as they went. But what did we do? We get promotion, and so we achieved something. So then I was thinking, we're never going to go to Wembley, are we? And suddenly what did we do? We go and play Grimsby at Wembley. So our next ambition is the Premier League, isn't it?
Mm.
And we'll get there sometime.
Fingers crossed.
We don't need our fingers crossed, we'll get there.
That's the confidence I like to hear. And you retired from being the groundsman in 2007, but that certainly wasn't the end of your association with the club. And nowadays you're the referee's liaison officer. What does that involve?
Meeting the officials, looking after their needs, make sure they get refreshments, make sure they get the team sheets on time. Any complaints, or if there's a problem pitch-wise, get the groundsman to see them, or anything they need really. And I know quite a few of them on personal terms. One was one I know extremely well is the referee at the cup final this year, Lee Probert. I've known him quite a long time, and I've seen him come from local football all the way up to what he's achieved. I believe he's even a FIFA official as well. So
do you also liaise with the referees and officials at half-time and after the game?
yes, yeah. Because sometimes after the game, if a certain incident has happened, they'll sort of say, John, can you see the manager, get the manager to come and see me, or things like that. Maybe they want a special report. Some incidents happen, they might say, they want a video sent to the FA, general things like that crop up, really.
So you must be party to a few private conversations between the officials that you have to hear but not repeat.
I think that's part of the job. I think you've got to. Well, I've always been like that, really. Confidence. I feel you've got to have confidence in the referee. The referee's got to have confidence in me, and that's how you build up a working relationship. If you can help them in any way, well, help them. Because you're not trying to curry favour for the team. You're just doing a job representing the club, which is most important. And if you look after them, they know everything's above board, and that's the job. I believe they've got to respect you, and you've got to respect them.
And do you ever get any irate managers come into the ref's door? I think, well, a couple of names spring to mind of people like who are a bit fiery, like Paolo Di Canio, Paul Ince. Do you ever have to say, you're going to have to wait outside for another 20 minutes or whatever? Well,
they have what they call a cooling off period, which is 30 minutes. Now, I've had to say to them, I'm sorry, you can't see them. On a lot of occasions, the referees will turn around and knock on the door, and it'd be the opposing secretary or so-and-so and say, we want a word with you. And he'll say, yeah, all right, and he'll just have a word with him. But obviously if there's a bit of a fiery incident, they want a cooling off period.
Last year, you were awarded with the Unsung Hero Commendation at the Football League Awards.
That's right.
That must have been a special moment.
It was a very special, very, very honoured, really, to get it. It was a surprise, really, as well, So, anyhow, at least I did get recognition, and it was very, very nice. I really appreciated it.
And how did you find out? Did the Football League phone you up, or was it someone at the club?
The clubs. Liz came and said to me, you've got an invitation at, I think it was the Brewers in London, and you've been nominated for this award. And so we went up. I went up with the club. It was very nice.
And just to finish up, John, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions going back to being a groundsman. What is it that drives groundsmen the most crazy? Is it things like goalies marking out the area, or maybe slide tackles in the mud, or is it pitch invasions or something like that?
Yeah. It doesn't seem to happen so much now. That goalkeepers used to mark out their territory. They used to gauge the ground out at the post to the centre of the goal. Different goalkeepers used to do these things. That used to. We even went through a time, funny enough you talk about that, got to the stage where we even thinking, and I believe it went to the FA to get permission to put little white marks on the 6-yard line level with the goalpost, but that never materialised. And it doesn't seem to happen much now. Even sliding tackles don't. So that's the worst thing, to be quite honest. I personally think what used to be a nightmare for me, training on the pitch. I find that was the worst, a training session, because what they do, they do the same thing, repeat, and they're doing the same runs down the pitch all the time. And well, as we say, things have improved, but you've got lamps now they can put on to help the pitch grow in the winter. But going back and saying to me old thing again is, then in the winter come, the grass didn't grow again to the spring. So if you lost it, the whole object was to keep as much grass as you could, as long as you could. Otherwise, you start getting mud and that sort of thing. But that used to be the bugbear I used to find.
And in those days, you must have watched a game, first of all, willing the team to win, like any fan, but also you must have watched it through slightly different eyes, because you were always keeping an eye on how the pitch was faring.
I think there's only one regret I found working, was that where you could be a supporter and be vocal as a representative of the club, that has got to go out of the window to a certain extent. You can't very well say, ref, you were a load of rubbish, because if he got enough of that, he could report you and report it to the club. So I do find you bottle up your emotions more than being a supporter, which is unfortunate in one way, but it's good to be part of the club, really.
Well, thank you so much, John, for telling us all about your 75-year association with the club. I feel like we've just touched on most of it. There's an awful lot of ground to cover in those 75 years, but it's been really interesting to hear everything that you've been able to remember from those many decades. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
That's all right. Don't forget George Best.
Oh, tell us about him.
Yeah, he was a good fella. One of the nicest people I've ever met. George Best. Great fella. Nice. Honour to meet him. Pleasure to meet him. A lot of players I've met. Had Glenn Hoddle. Found he was a very nice person. Anyhow, we've reminisced. Time has come to an end. Not quite the end yet, but
there's a few good years left.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Hopefully.
Brilliant, John. Thank you so much.
That's all right.
Had a great morning with John, and we must have carried on chatting about the Cherries and various other topics besides for at least an hour after the interview. The new season is barrelling over the horizon, so if you want to join in with our neat line in Cherry-related patter on the podcast, then please get in touch by emailing alldepartmentspodcast@gmail.com or via Twitter @alldepartments. Don't forget, all our interviews are archived on the website at www.alldepartments.wordpress.com. Well, I've been digging around for another addition to my small pile of cherry red records lately, but alas to no avail. What I did stumble across was this epic instrumental of a national institution, and I can already feel it will feature heavily in the soundtrack of the coming season. So up the Cherries in all departments, and goodbye!